Hey everyone, it's Ben from Board to Bits, and this is part 4 of our bar chart tutorial in Unity. So in our last video we got our bar chart functioning, where we can put in some integer values and the bars appear at the right size and stay within our graph. Now we're going to add some color and a little bit of labeling to include a little bit more valuable information in the graph. So to start, what we're going to do is we're going to take our prefab, our bar holder, and add it back into our chart just as a single prefab here, so that we can add a couple more items to this. Right now all we have is this single bar. What we're going to want to add is a label that appears beneath the bar that tells us what are we looking at. Are we looking at a player? Are we looking at a particular resource? That sort of information there. In addition, we're going to add a second text object right at the top of the bar that is going to tell us what the value is. Another solution you could do is you could add like numbers up the y-axis of the chart. However, that can get a little bit sticky with a dynamic chart like this because you don't necessarily know, are things going to divide evenly? Where do you want those to lie? Do you want one at the top and then one in the middle? Do you want, 4, 3, etc.? So it's a little bit easier if you just have a label on each bar so that you can still see their relative values, but it saves us a little bit of legwork. So let's start by getting the label set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on the bar holder, not the bar itself. We're going to go to UI and create a new text object. It's going to appear in the middle of the screen, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to position it just below the bar. And so how we're going to do that is we're going to go over to our rect transform component, to the little reticle here that lets us choose our anchors, and we're going to set it up against the bottom anchor here. However, what we're actually going to do first, we can do that, and I can show you here how that works. If we hit this and we hold Shift, or we hold Alt, it will move that down for us. However, we don't want the pivot of it to be at the bottom too. We want the pivot to actually be at the top so that we're measuring our distance between the label and the graph. So what we're actually first going to do is we're going to hold Shift so that we're setting the pivot as it says here, and put that at the top. But then, so now you see our pivot is now at the top of this label, and now we can hold Alt and set our position so it's at the bottom. And what this gives us now is it's resting on the bottom, which is not where we want it. We don't want this label inside the graph, we want it just below it. But what we can now do is go over to our position, and if we make that 0, we see that it actually lies right on that edge now. And if we make it something like -10, it just gives it a little bit of space there. We're also just going to center this so that it's they're not all going to be leaning to one side of the bars. So that's all we need to do there. We can save that. One other quick thing we can do is we can change the name of this. I'm going to double click it over here, and I'm going to call this label. I'm going to jump back to my bar holder and hit apply, and that will add that to the prefab as well as to this instance we have here in the scene. So the next one we're going to add is this text, the label bar, not the label bar, sorry, the value text for inside of the bar. For that one, we're actually going to add it to the bar because we want it to relate to how this moves up and down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click here, UI, text, and remember that's right-clicking on bar so that it becomes a child of the bar. Otherwise, you can just drag it in, same effect. And now this time we can actually just click up here, hold down Shift and Alt, and hit this top middle one, and that will align it perfectly there for us. I am also going to quickly center it horizontally and vertically so that there's, again, that little bit of a gap between the top line of the bar and our text. I'm also going to change this text to something like number because we know a numerical value is going to be going in there, so a couple of pound signs. And the label, actually, I will change to bar label. I'm going to go back up to our bar holder and apply that. So now our prefab has all of the constituent parts it needs. Actually, one last thing I just noticed here, I should change the text of this as well. I'm going to call it bar value, just bar value, so that this is the where the numerical value goes in our bar. Okay, so that's all set. Apply that one more time. Now what we need to do is we need to tie these two elements to our bar script. So we need to now dive into MonoDevelop And here we see our bar chart class. And so what we're going to do now, let me see here. Do I want to add this to the bar? Yes, we're going to add this to the bar, because the bar is actually what we are populating with. So right now we have an image. We're going to add two public text objects. The first one is going to be called label, and our second one is going to be called bar value. Try to keep the names the same so it becomes very clear now when we go back to Unity. We're on our bar holder, and now we have a space for our label, which will drop in there, and we have a space for our bar value. One last time, we're going to hit apply so that these connections are now in our prefab as well. And that means that we can actually now delete this object, because this object is ready to go. We just need to tell our class what to do with it. So we can delete the bar holder from the scene, and if we go down here, we'll see that we still have that label and that bar value in our prefab. Now we can jump back over to MonoDevelop though, and we can do something with these in our bar chart class, which is where we had originally set the height of our bar. Now we're going to be affecting the rest of these elements of this bar chart. So in order to give the bar label, we need some label information. Now in a game, this is probably going to be coming, as I've said before, from the game itself. Like if you have players, it would be you would go through the list of the players, take their names maybe, and add them as labels to these bars. In this case though, we're just going to create, much like we have our input value array, we're going to create two more arrays here. We're going to create one, and this one is going to be a public string array, and it's going to be called labels. Simple enough. And we're going to add one more too, because the other thing we want to do, actually no, we'll wait on that. I'll show you that at the very end of this. Just going to stick with the labels right now. So what we do with this now is we can go in here, in this section of the script is where we're adding our bar. And so this is where we have direct access to the current bar that we're adding. So we can do everything we need to right in here pretty easily. So the first thing we can do is we can say new bar. And if we remember, new bar is a bar class object. So new bar dot label dot text equals, and now we're going to pull whichever label aligns with the number of the input value. So one thing you do want to make sure here is that you are making sure that your arrays have the same amount of information. If you have 5 input values, you want to make sure you have 5 labels. If you have less than that, you're going to get an outside of array error, and your graph is not going to complete. There are some, we can do a quick bug check to avoid that, but it's worth keeping in mind. So here what we can do is we can say new bar dot label dot text equals labels I being the iteration that we had in our loop. Now let's do a quick bug check for this, just in case. If we say here if labels dot length is less than I, let me think about this for a second here, because if I is 0, and is less than or equal to I, because even if it's equal to, there's not going to be one right there for us. Less than or equal to I, then instead new bar dot label dot text should just be, we'll say, undefined, and so that we will know that we have an issue there. However, if it is greater, or if it's, so long as we have enough labels, then we can just put in the labels. So we'll just say else, and then copy and paste this in. So now what we should see, if we go back to our game, we should have, in our bar chart object, we now have input values and we have some labels here. So let's say we only have 2 labels though. Let's say we have planes and trains here. And then I hit play. This should just show us undefined as our third bar. Perfect. Planes, trains, undefined, because we don't have enough labels to fulfill this chart. And that, kind of lets us, it still works. We can still see that the general functionality is working, but we can see that there is some information that is definitely missing from here. Likewise, we also haven't updated our number labels yet, so we're going to do that right now. So for this next part, pretty simple as well. All we have to do here is say, now this time we don't have to worry about this sort of not being enough label information, because we know if there isn't an input value, we're not making a bar, so we're guaranteed to have an input value for every bar we're making. So here now what we can say is new bar dot bar value dot text equals, and this is simple enough, we're just going to say equals input value, or actually we had actually brought it into here, so we'll use this one, vals, because we might not actually be pulling from here in future cases. Vals I dot toString. And you want to make sure you do this because while you can always debug log an integer value and you'll see it and there'll be no problem, if you try to put an integer value into a UI text component, it won't naturally convert it for you. You have to explicitly convert it to a string. So always add toString to your ints or your floats or any non-string value. So we'll save that, and now we should see here, if we go back here again and hit play, that sure enough now those values appear. And this works pretty well. However, there is one kind of a gotcha case in this that is worth noting, and that's if we make this, say, this middle value something really small compared to the others, like 2. You've got 20, 2, and 13, and we hit play. Let's see if this will be small enough. Actually, that's still not bad. But what if I made 20 to be 200? Now we hit play. We suddenly see that this 2 is dropping below the chart and like overlapping the line there a little bit. So it's really not a good experience for trying to see what that number is supposed to be. We can fix that though pretty quickly with another quick, not an error check, but we just want to check the size of the bar and say if it's too small, instead of putting it below the line, let's just flip it up to the top. And this is pretty simple for us to do. Basically what we're looking at here is the fact that when we have that number there, it had that pivot that we set. And we set it to be, I believe we set it to be at 0. Actually, I can drag this in here and look. Let's know what we're talking about, Ben. Yeah, so the pivot is 0.5, meaning it's in the middle, but then it's actually at 1. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to move that pivot down to 0 and then push it up to the top of the bar. So we can do that pretty easily, like I say. We'll just hit delete here. So we're going to do a quick thing here. We're just going to do an if. I'll write it out quickly. If height is too small, move label to top of bar. And so how we'll do that is we're going to use the size that we get, which is actually right here. Just this RT size delta is our size, because that's what we set over here. So we can just pull that and say if RT dot size delta dot y, because we only want the height, is less than, we'll say 30f. 30 is pretty good size. That'll give us enough leeway. As long as we have more than 30, there should be room for that text box. So if it's less than 30, then what we want to do is we want to say new bar dot bar value dot rect trans. Now why is that not getting the rect transform for me? I guess I have to do get component rect transform. Interesting. Oh, I wonder. No, I have UI. All right, well, we'll have to do it this way. Get component rect transform dot pivot. We're going to set that equal to a new vector 2, which is, we're going to keep that 0.5 for the x, but we're going to make it 0 for the y, because right now we had shown that it was 1. We're going to make that 0. And then we just need to quickly make sure that we reset the position so that its y is 0, which will flip it up to the top of the bar for us. So we'll say new bar dot bar value dot get component rect transform again. And if you're doing this multiple times, you would probably want to actually store this component into a value. But for now, we'll just do it this way. Anchored position, that's actually the one we want, equals, and we can just say vector2 dot 0. And that will work fine for us. Because for the position, it's based on that anchor point, or that pivot point. So that will center it perfectly for us. So now we can go back over to here, and even though our bar chart, oops, don't want to rename it, has this really small value, when we hit play, it flips up to the top for us there so that we still see it very clearly. It's not getting lost in the mix of the lines that are over here. So the last thing we want to do to kind of make our bar chart complete is add some color to it. And this is going to work very similarly to how we did labels. I'm going to show you one other quick way that you can do an error check for this, though. That gives you a little bit more leeway, and it works better for colors because you're not going to be giving incorrect information when you do this, but it will give you, like I say, a little bit more breathing room in terms of if you happen to exceed the number of colors you have. And so what we're going to do for this is we're going to go back to our bar chart. We're going to add one more public array, and this is going to be an array of colors. And we're just going to call this colors, because, whoops, no, not color space, just colors. We can go back to here, and there our colors appear. Start with just one. Make sure its alpha is all the way up. We'll just do red. Keep this pretty simple here. Make it 3 now. We'll do red, blue, and green. So now we have 3 values. Now what we're going to do in our script is we're going to say, we can add this to the very bottom, or actually we're going to add this up where we did the size of the bar, because this is all stuff we're doing with the bar here. Size bar. At this point we're setting the label, and then here we're setting the value label. So right after we size the bar, what we're going to do is we're going to say new bar dot color equals, and now what we could just do is say colors I, but similar to our labels, if we have too many pieces of too many integers or too many values and not enough colors, we're going to run into an error once we exceed that number. So instead what we're going to do is we're just going to say colors modulo colors.length. And modulo is a pretty cool, if you don't know about it, definitely look it up. Basically all it does is it will divide, in this case I, by this number, but instead of giving you the actual division, it gives you the remainder. And it's really useful for doing anything with arrays or list work, because it oftentimes will give you like whatever excess you have of something, and so then you can address that. So in this case, what it's basically going to do is say, if we've exceeded the number of colors, just loop right back to the beginning again and start with those colors again. And you can do this basically an infinite number of times. So now what we can do, we'll see here that this works normally. If we hit save, with just three values and 3 colors as we have right now, we can hit play, and we see those have the red, blue, and green. But if I were to make this 6 values, and we'll just say, 50, 60, and 25, save, and hit play now, oops, hit play and keep it playing, we see that those colors just keep on repeating. The trains, planes, the labels here start going undefined, because for that we're just putting in a placeholder, but for the colors we can just repeat them as often as we need to until the graph is filled. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up this series on making bar charts. If there are any outstanding questions, please let me know in the comments, and I will, if there's any ones that are like, oh, I really should have covered that, I will certainly do a follow-up video to take a look at that. But otherwise, hopefully this gets you started on creating some cool bar charts for use in your games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see everyone next time.